This is Gardening in America, and I'm Ed Hume. Today we're in Lake Wales, Florida, at the Bok Tower Gardens, and I'm with David Price, the Director of Horticulture. What part of the gardens are we in here, David?
Well, Ed, we're standing at our Pinewood House, which is adjacent to Bok Tower Gardens. The Pinewood House was built in 1927 by C. Austin Buck as a winter retreat, and it was purchased by the foundation in 1970. We use it for our board retreats. We have other educational programs, chamber music here, and also tours of the house and grounds.
Now tell me also, I noticed the landscaping is quite different all the way around this home.
Yes, it's an eclectic design of really a series of gardens, and it's in the classic Tuscan design with the upper level with the bosque and the alleys of citrus, and then where we're standing now with the terrace garden, the frog fountain behind us, and the grotto to our right. And then through this main axis goes through the center of the house, which the whole garden is actually balanced on this axis. And then out the back of the house, it's an informal design, much as a Robinsonian type English garden.
It's beautiful. Tell me about the urns.
These are actually oil jars. The correct term is tinajones. They are olive oil jars brought from Spain in the 19th century. And also the 18th century. Olive oil was brought from Spain to Cuba, and then the oil was used, and these were disposable containers at the time. And then people in Cuba had used them as garden ornaments. C. Austin Buck was the vice president of Bethlehem Steel, and he was working in Cuba and really liked the Cuban Mediterranean style. And so when he built this house, he brought these jars here.
And of course, this is only one small part of the beautiful gardens here at Bok Tower Gardens. So tell us a little bit about some of the other areas that you have.
Well, at the gardens, we have quite a few distinct gardens. We have the historic landscape gardens, which surround the tower. We also have a wildlife walk. It's a Pine Ridge Nature Preserve. It's a 25-acre preserve that we are ecologically managing. Wildflower blooms are in the fall time, and then we have our visitor center, where we have a little bit of history about the gardens and Edward Bok, and we have an English wall garden on the back side, and some native plantings around.
I understand you also have an endangered plant species program.
Yes, Ed, we're a member institution of the Center for Plant Conservation, and we work to conserve rare and endangered plants. These are federally listed endangered plants that occur in Florida, and these plants are endangered of imminent extinction.
Thanks very much for sharing the garden with us, David.
Thank you.
Absolutely beautiful. If you're looking for some early color in the garden, there are some great early flowering rhododendrons. Look at this one, for example. It's a variety called cream crest. This is an evergreen variety of rhododendron, but you'll notice it has a rather upright habit of growth. Here's another great one. This is much lower, as you can see. Elizabeth is the variety. And you know what's unusual about this one is that it very often flowers again in the fall. I found out one thing about this variety, though. It doesn't particularly like feeding, so go light on the fertilizer around Elizabeth. And this is a variety called Latangents. And notice the light blue flowers on it, really pretty, and the dark, dark foliage. You can see it's a very, very low growing species type rhododendron. Very pretty color though, isn't it? You can imagine what that'll look like when it's in full bloom. And if you head along with the whites and some of the other colors, oh gosh, it'd be just outstanding. And here's another neat variety, also an evergreen. All these are, in fact. This is a variety called Ramapo. And it's kind of an unusual color, isn't it? It's kind of a plum color rhododendron. And, you know, I don't think there's really many rhododendrons in this color, even though there are something like 30,000 varieties of rhododendrons. This is really an unusual one. And again, very compact in its growth habit. And you can see because of that, you can imagine it's just a huge bouquet when fully in bloom. And here's a neat dwarf red one. Don't see many dwarf red varieties of rhododendrons. This one's called Lori Eichelser. As you can see, beautiful dark green foliage. This is one that was developed in the state of Washington. Really a nice low growing red flowering variety of rhododendron. And back in here is a very popular one, usually a little brighter color than this, but this is late in the season for it. It's a variety called PJM. Now the important thing about all of these varieties of rhododendrons is when you plant them in the garden, be sure you plant them right at ground level. If you plant them too deep, they'll grow but they won't flower. The other thing is that they benefit, maybe with the exception of Elizabeth, they benefit from a feeding of rhododendron fertilizer, usually in late February, early March, late winter in other words, and again in late spring if they need it. But when you have beautiful foliage color like this, I'm not too sure that they need that much attention. Protect them from hot midday sun. And when you plant them, of course, mix lots of organic humus in the soil. They really do well in a good fertile soil, but kind of a natural soil at the same time. The beautiful early flowering rhododendrons. What a nice addition they are into the garden at this time of the year. And remember, you look at the foliage all 12 months of the year. So not only flowers, look at the foliage too. Today we're in Federal Way, Washington at the Weyerhaeuser corporate headquarters. We're at the Pacific Rim Bonsai collection, and I'm with the curator, Dave DeGroat. Dave, this is a magnificent bonsai. Gosh, you have some gorgeous ones here.
Well, thanks a lot. This has actually come from China, the trees, the rocks, and the tray, and the artist, who is from the city of Yangzhou, put this together, created this especially for us.
Oh my gosh, it's gorgeous. Now, what is the routine maintenance of bonsais like this?
Well, this time of year, even though it's in a tropical conservatory, this is putting on a lot of new growth. The trees are responding to different light levels as we have more sunny days and just longer daylight length. So what we're finding right now is that it's pushing out, I would say, almost an inch a day of new growth.
Oh, wow.
That's
that
substantial.
So what do you have to do now to maintain this?
Well, this is a daily routine of coming in on this particular bonsai, or in Chinese panjing, and working on this in terms of pinching back the new growth. The strategy usually is to come in on a new shoot like this. If it's going off, as this one is, in an upward direction that we don't want, we will actually eliminate the entire new shoot.
Cut it off completely.
Yes. Typically, if it's going out in a direction that we want to keep, as this one is, straight outward from the plant, will retain that much of it, 1 to 2 leaves per segment. Now, if we move down further, this one down here, it's easy to see that what we really want is the new bud pointing outward from the interior. So we're going to come in here, cut that off, and we've preserved only 1 leaf on the new segment.
Now, how often do you do that?
Well, this one, of course, this time of year, this is a daily kind of maintenance on the tree. We can maybe skip a day, but basically daily maintenance. In the wintertime, when it's much more suppressed by the low light levels, this would be maybe a weekly occurrence.
I see. Now, if you wanted to direct any of these branches in a different direction, what would you do?
Well, we have 2 different ways of going about it. One way is, as we did here, trimming to find the bud, which is basically pointed in the same direction as the leaf petiole, and trimming it back to that. The other way, however, that's used especially with temperate plants because they don't have this much growth, is to use bonsai training wire. And we use 2 different kinds of wire. Most of the display trees use copper wire.
Oh, yeah.
And in here, where these tropicals are growing very fast, the soft aluminum is easier to remove when that becomes necessary.
Sure. And you can get all kinds of information on this by visiting the beautiful Pacific Rim Bonsai collection at Federal Way at the Weyerhaeuser corporate headquarters, because Dave and his staff conduct regular classes. Thanks very much, Dave.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
This is a great time of the year for planting potatoes. These are certified seed potatoes from the garden center, and you want to keep that in mind because if you buy them in the supermarket, they've been treated with a growth retardant and you won't find the eyes on them. These are already, they're certified disease-free and the whole works. So there is an eye there and an eye there, and we can cut right between here. Now you'll notice, see right away, the moment I do that, see the moisture there on the cuts? So we want to let that sit for a while and do what's called callus over, kind of form a scab in other words. Now this is a variety called Yukon Gold, and I've already cut this one. In fact, I cut it several hours ago, and so you can see that it has calloused or formed the scab kind of over the top. There's the eyes. So all we need to do, potatoes are really easy to plant. All we really need to do is to make a hole in the soil here and plant them about 2 inches deep, like about so, and simply cover over. And hey, don't worry about fertilizer, don't worry about anything. Potatoes really do thrive on a rather poor soil. In fact, in Europe, at the turn of the century, they always planted the potatoes in an area where they were going to put a lawn or a vegetable garden. That was the first crop to go in because it would break up the soil and it would do really well in poor soil. So basically that's the same thing we can keep in mind here. So let me just quickly plant another one here. And this is a little bit larger. In this particular case, the eye is on this end. So what we'll do is just set the potato about 2 inches deep, like so. It's all done. There are so many different varieties. Keep in mind that some varieties are more resistant to scab than others. So that's probably, the thing that you should keep in mind. Look for the varieties that are scab resistant, and most of them are the russet type potatoes. Now, also, let's just take a minute, since we're talking about the vegetable garden, and talk a minute about the rhubarb. This is another great perennial vegetable to use in the garden. And I've already opened the package on this particular one. But basically, all you need to do to plant rhubarb in the garden, again, is to dig a hole. This one will take a little bit of nutrients if you can. And I've already mixed a little in this particular case, as you can see, already in with the soil. And then all we have to do is to set that right at ground level. See, right there where the new growth starts, that's ground level. And pull the good soil in and firm it down a little, and that rhubarb will just do exceptionally well. So great time to plant potatoes and rhubarb. There's some super perennials that you can use for rockery planting. Actually, they can also be used for ground covers, but we normally think of them for use to kind of cascade over the rockery. And this is one of them. This is the yellow flowering basket of gold. And it soon will be in bloom and just covered with really bright yellow flowers. There's another variety called lutea, which has soft yellow flowers. And we're going to plant this in the rockery so you can see as it progresses year after year and kind of cascades down over the rocks. Now this is a pretty rockery and we don't want to hide it very much, but nevertheless the rockery perennials would be a nice addition right across the top. This is candy top, which is a pure white flower, and I'm putting it now between the yellow and then the arbrecia. By the way, this is a dwarf variety. There are some that get quite large and there are some then that are more compact. This is arbrecia, and I hope you can see the differences here. The color changes just a little bit between these varieties, but arbrecia comes in several different colors. It is an evergreen type of a rockery plant. So now let's see what we're talking about. We're talking about yellow, we're talking about white, and white of course will bring out the beautiful color of the arbrecia. And then we're going over here with one of the lighter colors of the creeping phlox, which is another great perennial, and that will cascade down too. And after it gets through flowering, I'll give it a little bit of a haircut. Then the next thing I'm going on to is this one, and this is of course the very beautiful sea thrift, or armeria is the botanical name. And what's so nice about this is that it does well anywhere. It'll do well in salt air or near the seaside, or it'll do really well even in very hot climates. A really nice plant. And then next we're going to come in with this one, which is a little bit darker in color, as you can see, and that's the Arabis Spring Charm, which has a nice, more of a compact growth habit. It's not going to cascade very far over the edge of the rocks. And then this one will cascade way over. And again, see how the color combinations go really well together. And I think that's pretty well what you want to accomplish in your landscape. That's a juga. Now, let's just take a minute and plant one of these. You can see the root system is quite dense, so I'll just massage it a little bit, like so. And I'm not quite ready because I haven't dug the planting hole yet. But what I'm going to do is to dig down into this soil and dig a pretty good sized planting hole with this trowel. And then what's the key, of course, anytime you're planting, is to add some processed manure, and I'll add a little bit of peat moss, mix it in with the soil that's there, and then just simply set the plant in and cover it over. And it's going to cascade down over that area beautifully. Two of my favorite plants for spring color in the garden are the Osmanthus Davalii and, of course, the spring flowering azaleas. First, let me tell you about Osmanthus. Look at how this is loaded with flowers. The dark green foliage, but the flowers are very, very fragrant. And it's what's so nice about this plant is you can allow it to grow free-form like this one is, or you can train it as a hedge if you want to. Now the plant eventually will get about 4 to 6 feet tall. It's evergreen, very hardy down to about 0. But it's a great plant if you want to for a low edging, or you can also use it as a low hedge. So anywhere between that 4 to 6 foot range or even lower. But the intense fragrance is outstanding in the dark green foliage. What a nice plant to use in the garden. Grows in full hot sun, and the best time to shear or prune it is as soon as it finishes flowering, of course. Now let's also talk about these, the evergreen azaleas. This is a variety Tina, and in our garden the evergreen azaleas are just coming into bloom, but they'll bloom mainly in April and into May. Tina is a very low growing variety. Now this one right next to it with the light foliage is a white flowering variety. And keep in mind that these azaleas like protection from the hot midday sun. Here's another variety, and again one of my favorites, just bursting into bloom, and it's called Hino Crimson. The foliage is a deep crimson in color, and in the fall and winter, and then the flowers are crimson as well. It is an evergreen though. It'll hold its foliage all 12 months of the year. Here's, way over here, is a low growing variety. This is called pink gumpo, and gumpo comes in white and pink. And those are only just a few varieties of the evergreen azaleas. Remember, they like shade or partial sun and shade. Feed them at this time of the year with a rhododendron type fertilizer, and you can use that on the osmanthus as well. And these two plants are my favorites as plants of the week. Next, let's talk about pruning, and we're in Oregon at Monrovia Nursery, and I'm with the general manager, Mark Buckholtz. Mark, what kind of plants are these?
Yeah, this is a number 7 dwarf Alberta spruce, and the type of pruning we're doing today is converting this plant into a spiral form.
And the gentleman pruning behind you, how long will it take him now to prune one of these plants?
Well, it'll take him only about 30 minutes to make this first cut, but the plant itself is 9 years old from the day the cutting was stuck.
Yes. And where would we use these in the landscape?
Well, these are one of our most popular items. We sell thousands of these a year, primarily as a focal point in the front yard, somewhere near a front door, in an area that commands quite a bit of interest.
Now, this is in a container. Could we plant it in the open ground, or should it remain in the container?
It's best in the open ground, although this is a very hardy variety. It'll grow just fine in any container.
I see. Now, I bring this into the garden. How much pruning am I going to have to do on this, and when should I do it?
Well, as he's just made the first cut today, Over the next year, he will continue to work on the shape, and it'll be saleable at 1 year from now. Once it goes to the garden center and is purchased by the consumer, just some light pruning after the flush of growth should maintain it very well.
So that'd what, be only once a year probably?
Oh,
huh?
once a year with some additional pruning, possibly midsummer.
Are there any special fertilizer requirements when we prune a plant in this manner?
Oh, just a general shrub or tree food, nothing special, not a lot of fertilizer required.
Now, in addition to this spiral form, you do many other forms too, don't you, here at the nursery?
Yes, we do. We grow approximately 12 different topiary forms, from the spiral that you see here to oriental pom-poms, vase-shaped, espaliers, many different forms.
Yeah, this is really fascinating to me that you can do this much of a shape in that short of a time, only a half an hour for each plant.
Right.
And how many plants do you have here?
Well, here at our Oregon location, we have approximately 10 million plants of different shapes and sizes, not including the propagation sizes, the small pots.
Sure.
I wanted to point out to you the care and expertise involved in growing these, or particularly pruning these. As I mentioned, we grow thousands and thousands of them, and we try to get them all to look one just like another. So it takes employees years to learn the skills to produce a plant like that, and that's what we're doing here today.
Thanks very much for sharing that with us. That's all the time we have. Hope you can join me at the same time again next time for Gardening in America.